The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. I am back. You are comfortably zoned with me, the Zig Zag Man, in Alameda, California. Talking about today, my guests are two of the grandchildren of the Brow. And to those of you who are not lifelong Dodger fans, they're going to explain who the Brow was. Angela and Greg, welcome to Comfortably Zoned.
Hello.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Good to have you. Believe me, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I'm a lifelong New York Kids fan, and you guys are the grandchildren of the former Batboy of the Brooklyn Dodgers, the most well-known Batboys in history. Really, truthfully, he was a storied part of the Dodger history, and I'm just finding out that he moved to LA with the Dodgers. Am I correct?
That is correct. Yeah, it actually is published incorrect a lot. You know, and then there's question of did he or didn't he, and he absolutely did. So much so that if you look at the 1958 Dodger yearbook, all of the signatures on it are the work of his, because the team wasn't there in time, and he got to LA first, and they needed to get to publish. And so all of the signatures of the 58 LA book are of Charlie's, and he did complete a full season before his death.
Oh, wow. Would you pronounce his last name for me?
Digiovanna. So Digiovanna. A lot of people put an I at the end. I've heard it pronounced that way too, Digiovanni, but it absolutely is an A at the end. And, you know, Greg, my cousin here, you know, he got blessed with the cool name. I did not get that name. My mom never, she married and, you know, I got those names. So, but
okay.
Yeah, Greg got the cool name.
I want you to give me a little envelope kind of bio of yourselves. Angela first and then Greg.
All right. I am a 47-year-old professional female. I live in Puyallup, Washington. I'm the mother of twin boys that are young men now. They're 25. I'm a sales professional. I specialize in digital marketing and, work for myself. Hustle and
Beautiful.
hide.
Yeah.
Me on the other hand,
No, Greg, you're Greg is I don't know. I think you're pretty awesome, Greg. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, my name's Greg.
Go ahead.
Oh.
So my name's Greg. I am the grandson of Charlie the Brow Digiovanna, almost 50. I live in Lake Stevens, Washington, which is near Everett. And I run a steel dealership, you know, like steel chainsaws. So I run a dealership and I also fix them.
I'm really familiar with Everett because I was the tops rep on the West Coast for like 15 years in the 80s and 90s. And I travel up to Everett. Buzzy Bavasi's kid was the general manager of Everett at that time. And I'm sure you remember him. So let's get into Charlie a little bit, if you will.
All right.
How did he first become the Batboy of the Dodgers?
So It's a funny story that a lot of people don't realize is actually tied to how he died. A lot of people don't realize that his heart attack was literally tied to how he became a Batboy. When he was a young teen, I estimate between 11 and 13, based on what I've been putting together a lot for his story, is he contracted rheumatic fever. He got rheumatic fever and was hospitalized for 4 years in treatment, and they told him he wasn't going to live. And while he was in the hospital, Leo DeRozier, who was the manager of the team at the time, sent him an autographed ball, like teams do to the sick kids in hospitals. And Charlie wrote him a thank you card back and told him about his love of the game and, how much he always loved baseball, but he's sad because he's been sick for so long and he never got to play the game that he loves so much. And so Leo told him, when you get better, come see me. I'll hook you up, kid. And he gave him his first job as a turnstile ticket taker, I estimate when he was about 16. And from that is where he ranked up, because he just became, as everybody knows, part of the Dodger family. He was so loved, but he did that by working his way up. He did anything and everything that was asked of him. He was,
and he did it well.
He did it well. And, and as he's, besides the most famous Batboy in baseball history now, is what I've been hearing and reading. He's also the best forgerer in baseball, which is, I've always found very hilarious and very savage.
There was actually a Sports Illustrated article that had Steve Garvey on the cover that was just about him and the ghost signing of baseballs and cards and whatnot. And to this day, he is still considered the very best.
Wow.
Yeah, I have quotes from, Duke Snyder said that Charlie could sign his name better than he could his own. But there's always ways to detect the work of the brow. If you look at the balls that are his, it's always funny to say Charlie's balls, but I can't do that without giggling. The work of the brow you can see by the order of the signatures, because oftentimes he put them in the exact same order, and he would just pick them up when he had spare time. And, but he was known to have chants in the dugout with the team and would chant songs to them as they signed the balls. But then as, the players got busy, Charlie would pick up where they were left off. And so he insisted that they all go in the same order so he could make sure and check off which ones needed to be signed, because as you know, players come in and out. And so he had to keep track of which ones were in and out. So I think it's an amazing talent of his.
I've always said never to trust an autograph legitimacy unless you've seen it signed in person.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine how many people who read that article and had memorabilia signed by, quote, the Dodgers, end quote, were disappointed how much money was lost and gained, how many people were disillusioned, how many people were amused. It's autograph collecting is, I did it as a kid. I'd go down to the hotels and hockey, basketball, baseball, whoever came in and get autographs. And
right.
Some of them I still have, and I'm happy to have them, and I know they're legitimate. So
yeah.
Sometimes even the certificates of authenticity are forged.
Correct.
So you never know.
My mom recently gave me one of hers. My mom has a couple, and Greg, I think your dad has like 6. We don't have a lot of them in our family. And I had never, the only one I ever acquired myself was a gift for my mom for Christmas one year. And she recently gave me an early inheritance, is what she called it, and gave me that same ball so I could have one in my home of his. And it actually comes with the letter of
Authenticity.
Yeah, I always mess that word up. And it says it's the work of the brow, that they actually have their value. But I've been in the blogs. Greg's dad, Greg, my uncle, he and I both were in some Dodger blogs back like between 2009 and 2012. And I've seen some of the chatter about it over the years of some people, you know, can spot the work of his. I actually recently found, my mom has a really amazing scrapbook, and I only say amazing because I made it for her, of all her memorabilia and pictures. And I recently was going through it, and I found something that I didn't know that she had tucked in there, was a practice sheet of Charlie's, and it has the LA Dodger emblem in the middle. And it was all of the signatures of that year, because, I mean, obviously he wasn't there for the 59 season. And if it had the LA emblem in the middle, but it also has his signature at the bottom, which is really cool because that's not seen very often, of his actual signature. And so I actually have that cleaned up image. I'm going to be using that. We're starting a foundation. I'll talk about that later if you let me, Ralph. But we're starting a foundation because there's a whole bunch that have come together from Charlie's legacy that I only recently in this last year kind of cracked Pandora's box.
Angela has kind of become the family historian when it comes to all the Dodger stuff, and her grandfather.
Yeah.
Okay, let me interrupt for a second, Greg, because I got to hear your voice a little bit. What are your memories of all of this?
Well, of course, we had pictures in the house where I grew up of my dad and grandfather. Of course, we never met him because he died before we were around. My dad was only 8 years old when he passed away. But, you know, he would tell stories. Of course, my dad has a 1955 World Series ring that he would only wear during the playoffs. And it was unique not only because it has Charlie's signature on it, but the stones that were in it were originally sapphires, Dodger blue. The story, as I was told, he had a bit of a temper. He slammed his hand down on the table and all the stones fell out. So he had them replaced with diamonds.
Wow.
We also were given an opportunity after they won the 88 World Series. My dad wrote letters to the O'Malley family, Tommy Lasorda, and Earl Hershiser. The O'Malleys got back with us and wrote back to us and offered us tickets to go see the Dodgers. Not only that, we were supposed to have been able to meet Hershiser, but things got mixed up. That didn't happen. But we were fortunate enough to have sat in the owner's own personal box seats behind home plate. So field level, of course, just a few seats away from us is dugout, where Tommy Lasorda was addressing people there. So we worked our way up to the front of the crowd, let him know who we were, and he was able to just kind of shut everybody off and just talk to me and my brother and a couple of my cousins, right? Cousins, uncles? Peter,
cousins. Your dad.
Yeah, cousins.
Your dad's cousins.
And, of course, you know, Lasorda was a relief pitcher during that time, and he knew my grandfather quite well. Not only that, but to get into these seats, you have to go through a security checkpoint. Well, the individual that checked us in was the one and only Roy Campanella. Of course, he was still alive back then, and so we had an opportunity to meet with him and talk with him. Of course, you know, he knew my grandfather very well, and we got some pictures. It was really an incredible experience.
I can well imagine, and my memories of Lasorda was he went down to the minors when Sandy Koufax was signed as a bonus baby. They had to keep Sandy on the roster.
Lasorda was a way better pitcher.
He was a what? I'm sorry.
A much better coach than a pitcher.
Oh yes, absolutely. I'm a lifelong Giant fan, so I have to toot my horn in his direction. Give him credit. He was a terrific manager, and I remember seeing him in Candlestick. He was so hated. He'd come in from right field, and he got booed. But my feeling is that if they boo you, it's because they respect you.
Yep.
They don't boo, the average guy as an opposing fan.
Well, to get that many boos, you had to have really struck a chord with them.
Right. I just want to, in saying it, I just want to say, rest in peace, Spunky Lasorda, his son, and there's all kinds of stories about Tommy not accepting Spunky for what he was and who he was, and that's the only real taint on Tommy Lasorda. Not that it wasn't a big one. I had to mention that because you brought up the name, and that what happened was not good. But nevertheless, as Ted Kennedy would say, nevertheless, whenever there was a tragedy, well, nevertheless. Anyway, I put a pause on this conversation, and for that I'm sorry. But and I also want to say, to bring it up, Peter O'Malley was who you're mentioning is the owner. He was a terrific guy, and I got to meet him through Topps, and I'll tell you a very, very funny story regarding the Dodgers and Peter O'Malley. When he took over, he had to make a trade, and he told me that the worst trade he ever made. Who was it? Boy, I can't think of who it was. An infielder that he traded away and was sorry for. He was the kind of guy that if he made a mistake, he'd admit it. Unlike his dad, who was a little bit different along those lines. How did it affect people like Gino Simoli, who moved? I think Carl Furillo was one of those who moved from Brooklyn to L.A. How did that affect the organization? Angela, do you know anything about that, or can you elaborate on?
I don't overall, just because, again, I didn't live that. I do have these letters that I've actually only recently acquired from a friend that of Charlie's. So Charlie wrote letters as he traveled west with the team on Dodger letterhead, talking about everything. As you didn't know, I think it's published out there that the team caravanned out west from Brooklyn, and Charlie led it. And so these letters, he's talking about the team. He talks about when he gets to LA, he talks about taking the team shopping for their homes and where they built their homes. And I have pages and pages and pages of these letters that I recently got the full copies of from friends that still live in New York that were Charlie's friends. But we didn't have contact with until recently. It's literally like Pandora's box opened this fall for our family. So it's been a little bit of a whirlwind. I apologize. But yeah, in these letters, it talks about the team a lot. He talks about when they got out there. He talks about the Coliseum. I showed Greg this morning, there's a little circle. He drew like an oval of it. This Coliseum's huge. It seats 110,000 people. But honestly, to get into the nitty gritty of the controversy behind it, I was never really a part of it. I never really heard it in my conversations, but remember, this was long before I was born. So when I grew up as a kid in LA till I was 10. We went to Dodger games. I remember having that, quote, notoriety of, like, we get to go to games whenever we wanted to.
Right.
And I know my mom went to some Dodger dinners. I, of course, knew who our grandfather was. But as we got older, I remember I moved back to LA in 2005 when my grandma died, and took care of her. And I remember asking her, Grandma, like, how does this generation get tickets? Like, how do we get the seats? Like, who do we contact? And, my mom's cousins remember actually calling Buddy you said the name a little bit ago, Buddy Bavazia. I always mess the name up. Did I say that right? Like, they remember calling, like, my grandma had, like, his number to get tickets before. But in 2005, when my grandma was dying of breast cancer, I asked her, like, hey, like, how do we get the tickets? And she goes, nobody I know is still a part of the organization. It's really not worth it to go, to get free seats. Just pay for them. It's not worth it at this point. Nobody really knows who we are anymore. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't really put any clout to it. It wasn't really but I stayed in LA for another 12 years and went to Dodger games all the time. I raised my boys to be Dodger fans. Ironically, it was funny. We used to pay for our tickets. You never got free tickets or whatever. And so, raising a family, we would sit generally up in the bleachers. And I got a really funny story I heard from this family that sent me these letters recently, the Calderones. They live in Long Island. The Calderones. What's that?
Long Island, as it's pronounced by a lot of New Yorkers. Hey, I gotta say something. The move broke the heart of Brooklyn.
Yeah.
It was devastating for Giants moved at the same time. I was 11, and as a kid, it broke our hearts. And it really put a pall, if you will, on the city of New York.
Yeah.
It was a horrible thing. And I understand that O'Malley was given all this land and what have you. He planned the move for a long time. And it was out of greed. Yeah. It was out of greed on his part, and expansion was coming. So the West Coast would have gotten teams like the Giants and the Dodgers eventually. It didn't have to happen. But
I read something that said that had the Dodgers never left, the Mets wouldn't exist.
Right, and believe me, I'm a big Met fan to this day, but they didn't replace the Mets didn't replace the Giants and Dodgers more because of the rivalry that they had, and it's interesting that the early Mets, the first team especially, consisted of former Dodgers. Roger Craig, was a former Dodger.
Hodges.
Gil Hodges. Yes. Pignatano. I don't know if he was an original Met, but he was a coach for a long time with the Mets. He came from the Dodgers. I think Billy Lowe's might have not fall under that category. But Don Newcomb, all these people, the Mets are basically an offshoot of the Dodgers and Giants.
Correct.
They wear the colors, orange and blue, Dodger blue, and Giant orange.
Yep.
And so it could have been clearer that Mrs. Payson, who was on the board of directors of the New York Giants and was the only person to turn down, who voted against the Giants movement. So there's a lot of tragedy involved with that, and there's bitterness in people that continue to this day, that pass on their bitterness, that would never go to another game, all this. It's
I've spoken with Gil Hodges' daughter Irene. I've become friends with her through all the Hodges connections.
She's been a guest on the show. She's a wonderful person.
I've really enjoyed getting to know her this last fall, and she's really been supportive with what I've been trying to do. But there's an article that we have. I typed it up on my Facebook. I'll reshare it if you'd like with you, Ralph. There was an article written in the Coronet. My mom has the actual Coronet from 1959, July of 59. And it talks about, Charlie post-death, and it talks about a lot of who he was as being not just a bat boy. That's something that I know Greg and I both, grew up defending. Oh, he was just a bat boy? No, he was more than a bat boy. And, and we look at the 55 pitcher. We used to always say, no, he was more than a bat boy. It's been really fun to talk to people like Irene Hodges, because her dad, Gil, and my grandfather were best friends. They got really close in 1956 in Japan. Stories I'd never heard until this last year, and putting these connections together and hearing it kind of more of who is Charlie as part of the team. And, but hearing again, these people talking with Irene Hodges. My mom and I both got to talk to Carl Erskine this fall. We got to FaceTime with him. That was pretty cool. Jimmy Denny has become a good friend.
Yes. He's my Facebook friend and a good one. And the OISC has taught on our network, Comfortably Zoned, my network, with Peter Trump. And it's one he's an avid Dodger fan.
Peter Trunk and I are friends as well. Peter and I talked with my mom for the Dodger Baseball Chronicles as well. And being that, Greg and I both, were talking about this before we got on today, Ralph, is that, our parents were 6 and 8 years old when Charlie died. 6 and 8.
Your parents,
my grandma,
let alone you.
Yeah, my grandma was a 26-year-old widow with 3 children living across the country in LA. And, all of a sudden is a sudden widow. He was told that he wouldn't even be an adult. That's why he had such a huge life and such a huge presence, because he lived every day as if it was his last. You know what I mean? He went for it. The team loved him so much. Greg, what was the story I was telling you? They all pooled together as a Batboy, he doesn't usually travel, as we were saying, right?
Well, Batboys don't normally go on away games. He did. They brought him on the away games. I know my dad at one time had his away game uniform, still, with the half on it. So he was much more than a Batboy. He was a very important part of the Dodger family back then, and the Dodgers wouldn't be who they were back then without him.
He was absolutely, like I read he was, absolutely part of the Dodger lore. I have a really cool story. I don't know what our time's like, Ralph. I have a really cool story that I got shared with about Charlie at the stadium in Brooklyn at Ebbets Field. And do we have time for me to share a story?
We do, but I'd like to get in, after you tell this story, I'd like to get into your foundation a little bit, and you could explain what you're doing that is so very important. But tell the story first. All
right. So as I mentioned, growing up in California, I have memory of going to the Dodgers. I mostly went with my uncle Charlie, which would be Charlie Boy, my mom's younger brother. Went to the games just periodically. But when I went back as an adult, and then after my grandma passed away, and she's like, don't worry about trying to get hooked up on tickets, we just got tickets whenever we could. Sometimes I had some cool seats, box seats with friends. And most of the time when we brought the kids, we sat in the bleachers. So as I've gotten to know the Calderones now out in Long Beach, so sorry, Calderones, Long Island, I said Long Beach, California, Long Island. They tell me when I told him that story, he goes, well, you're sitting in your grandma's seats. And I said, what do you mean? Well, their cousin Joey has a memory. He's still alive. That's kind of terrible. Joey's late 70s. He's battling lung cancer right now, and we got to talk to him. And he shares a story of, so he would have been my grandfather Charlie's best friend's brother and son. So, his brother and nephew were coming to Brooklyn, and he's like, hey, I got you some seats. I'll put them at the box office under my name. Come and enjoy the game. They estimate it was about 1956 or 57 before they left Brooklyn. And so Joey was 13, and so maybe a little older than you, because you said they were 11 when you were 11 when they left, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
In 1946. And
okay,
it was the year the Campy was tragically injured. And that was, he played the last game, played in 57, got injured that winter, and that was horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, for all fans, tragic accident.
Right.
Today that wouldn't have happened. There were seat belts, and there weren't at that time. And Campy, O'Malley took care of Campy. There was that big tribute to him where all those fans lit lighters and a candle and honored him, and that was all paid for by O'Malley. So Walter O'Malley was, when you look back on him, and people look back at him and say he was horrible, he took care of Campy. And
he took care of our family too. I mean, honestly, he made sure my grandma and kids. I mean, like I said, my grandma was 26 when Charlie died. 26 as a widow with 3 children living across the country after one season of her husband being, he had just gotten promoted to assistant clubhouse manager. That's the promotion he took, taking the caravan over and getting there. And so when you think of the timeline there, it's crazy of just, 26 years old, 3 kids, you're a sudden widow. And rumor has it, I don't know if you ever heard this, Greg, rumor has it, and he's still alive. I really want to know. I really want to talk to Sandy Koufax. Grandma told me this story the summer she died. that apparently a year after she died, after Grandpa died, after Charlie died, so what, 59, 60, she was still, Grandma was considered a Dodger wife. My grandma, I have so many pictures. I have a really cool picture I found that actually was Irene Hodges' mother. I can't remember her name, but I sent the picture to Irene, and I said, hey, do you know who these women are? And it was her mom.
Her name was Joan.
Yeah, Joan. Yes, thank you. And it was Joan and her sister sitting with my grandma. So Grandma was actually, absolutely considered a Dodger wife. Well, Sandy Koufax, about a year or two after Grandpa died, tried to court Grandma. He asked her out on a date, and Grandma turned him down. And I told Grandma, man, why did you make that choice? Like, Sandy Koufax was hot too, but I told Grandma, and she literally said, I did not want to be a Dodger wife anymore. That's what she said. She didn't want to be a part of that world anymore. And I don't really understand that. I really have tried to dive into that, especially with everything we found this year. But going back to that stadium story, because it's a really cool story about Grandpa and Grandma on here. And so Joey's a 13-year-old kid, right? He goes with his dad. They got tickets because this hotshot Batboy in Brooklyn's got him tickets for Ebbets Stadium, right? Ebbets Field. Oh my God, I said it wrong. So they get there and they get these tickets, and the way Joey describes it is they're going in and they're just going up and up and up and up and up, like way up in the bleachers. And that's where their seats were. And he actually, as a 13-year-old kid, he said, my memory was like, well, this is pretty shitty. Like, oh, crappy. So I don't know if I can say that. Sorry. But like this hotshot puts us out in the bleachers. Like, what the heck? And he said it was about inning 2 or 3 that security came and got them and said, excuse me, are you the guest of Charlie Digiovanna? And they said, yeah. And they're like, well, come with us. And they take them all the way back down, all the way down by the dugout. And when they get there, Charlie's there, and he's like, hey, where you been? I'm waiting for you. And they're like, well, we've been in the seats, and they described where they were sitting. And he's like, no, man, those are Shirley's seats. I don't want my wife sitting by me while I'm working. Sit down, enjoy the game. And I hear this story from them, and I, again, never have met my grandfather, right? I've heard stories of this legend growing up. And this right. One story showed me so much, or told me so much of kind of what I've read and what I've heard about him. It put so much together of like, he's kind of like the homie hookup guy. Like, I feel like I've been kind of that my whole life too. That homie hookup, like, I got you. And so to hear that story, I loved it. But what I loved is that the Calderon said, you were sitting in your grandma's seats this whole time. I've been sitting in the bleachers because I never asked for a free thing. I never asked the Dodgers for anything. They don't care who I am today. That actually happened. I went to LA a couple months ago and got shut out. The Dodgers, LA right now, don't want anything to do with me. So, yeah, I'll say it. I said it loud and proud.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that. Time is of the essence. Let's talk about your foundation a little bit.
All right. So it's kind of a weird turn, but it does tie to Charlie because, as I mentioned, he died in, of course, 58. My grandma died in 2005 of breast cancer. I, as a 43, I'm 47 now, so 4 years ago, got breast cancer myself. And through it, they tested my genetics and found that I have the BRCA1 gene. If you're not aware of what that gene is, it's a high indicator of breast cancer. And Angelina Jolie, beautiful actress, made it famous about 10 years ago, and famously, because she lost her mom and her aunt to breast cancer or ovarian cancer, famously had a mastectomy and a hysterectomy as a statement of this is what you can do as an option knowing you have this gene. And it propelled to what is now called the Angelina Jolie effect, right? It's a big deal. It's made a 90% awareness of breast cancer and getting these genetics and how important it is. So for 3 years and 10 months, part of my story has been I've been a huge breast cancer advocate and all about breast cancer. Well, part of my story was blaming my grandmother my grandmother had breast cancer. Well, my grandma was one of 12. Remember, she came from Brooklyn, too. She was one of 12. My mom has 50 cousins, 50 first cousins. It's a huge family. I never felt like we were without family, right?
Well, you're Italian. I mean, isn't that expected?
But wait. My grandma is Jewish. My grandma's Jewish. There's a little bit of a controversy there. Yeah, my grandma's Jewish and my grandfather. So my grandma was one of 12, and my mom has 50 first cousins that I've stayed in contact with some of. I saw some this last summer. Their mom happened to be, I'll try to tell the story really quick because I do have the little commercial of it. Their mom was the first of my grandma's siblings to die. All this time I thought it was ovarian cancer, which would tie into the BRCA story. It was not. It was lung cancer. We had a conversation. They said, Angela, the BRCA gene does not exist on our side. You should ask your mom about her dad. Which, of course, I've known who her dad is. I've known Charlie Digiovanna, the legend, the best forger, the biggest, most famous Batboy in history, right? But I never, in all my 47 years, never once asked my mom, where is your dad's family? What happened to them? And I found them this summer. I found a sister, his sister passed away, but she only passed away in 2009, which meant she survived for 50 years after Charlie, residing in Florida, and looked for us because she knew that her brother had children. She had 3 biological children and raised 9 total children with her husband in Florida. We found cousins that we never even knew we had. Like I said, a Pandora's box opened. And the coolest part about it, kind of cool, because it did tie my story, my suspicions were correct. Tootsie, her actual name is Cordelia, which was Charlie's baby sister, 6 years younger. I have a really fun story about her, too. We could do in part 2 here, Ralph. Anyway, she has 3 biological children. One has passed away already, but her daughter, Marie, 65, 66 now, is a breast cancer survivor and a carrier of that BRCA1 gene. And I tied my horrible having breast cancer to finding my family legacy. I mean, that's literally what I did this summer. I found cousins. We took my mom down there for Thanksgiving, and we got to celebrate and meet family of hers that 65 years ago was taken away from her as a 6-year-old kid. And so with this story, oh my gosh, there's a cousin Charlie. There's a cousin Charlie, Ralph. He looks just like what I would imagine, and I could send you pictures. He looks just like what Charlie would look like. His name is Charlie. He was told all his life he looked like his famous uncle. There's kids, the cousins look just like me. But there's 6 girls in the generation of mine, 6 of them. None of them have tested for that BRCA gene by choice as of right now. But it's made me say, what can I do with this now? Because when I got breast cancer 4 years ago, I literally said the words, what is the purpose behind this? I have a mission behind this, and I just don't know what my voice is yet. So my voice is this. Just like the Angelina Jolie effect, I figured, you know what, I'm going to go right behind her. The Angela Motley Effect.com is our we're going to be doing the foundation is the Angela Motley Effect. We're bringing awareness, education. Do you know that my mom and my brother, who both are carriers of the gene now that we know, my brother has 2 children of his 4 that have tested positive of the gene. One is tested negative and one's too young to test. And my children haven't tested. But do you know that you have a 65% chance of breast cancer with this gene? 65% chance. Awareness is so much. But do you know that once I had breast cancer, my mom and my brother both had to jump through hoops with my letter just to get insurance to cover the saliva test. So I'm trying to bring awareness, education, and everything. And, and it's so cool because I really feel like my grandfather's spirit has been near me and with me and rooting me on this whole way, putting his family together with us that looked for us. They went to California in 94, went to the Dodgers. We were all living in Washington. They went to the Dodgers and do you know any information about Charlie's family? And they said, no, we were already here. In 94, there was no internet. there was no cell phones. How do you find people? So it's such a cool story. I have pictures for days. Like I said, we had a little reunion down there, or my son actually coined it. He said, Mom, it's not a reunion. You've never met them. We had a union and met the family and met the cousins. And it was surreal to put my mom back together. And she said, Angela, it's like you brought my dad back to life. And
wow,
my mom,
what a nice story.
yeah, my mom's only request in this was to talk to people that knew and loved her dad. So like I said, I've gotten one, Carl Erskine, the conversation of her with my mom. My mom with Carl Erskine was amazing. I can send you the recording of it. It's pretty great. Carl was fantastic and talked so highly about Charlie and how he treated everybody the same is one of the things we talked about. So yeah, it was pretty great to have that conversation. So that's it. That's the foundation. That's the story behind it. The AngelaMotleyEffect.com.
The foundation is built on making people aware. And that costs no money. You're not taking in any money that goes to support the people who founded the foundation. It's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I'm literally giving it all back. To me, you know, I have a friend that's helping me start it up, and I said it very clearly from the get-go. I said I never want to take a salary. I never want to take an income from this foundation. To me, I want to put everything out there. Like, I want to go and speak and empower. You know, men and women get breast cancer. I mean, 1 in 5 people get breast cancer today. 1 in 5. And if you know you have the genetics and you know you're susceptible to it, you know, being aware. Like, I didn't get the test. I remember when Angelina Jolie made it famous. I'm a huge fan of hers. I said back in 2013, I wish I could get that test. And in hindsight, in 2013, had I taken that test or gotten that test, would I have gone to the extreme of that she did? I don't know. But I got breast cancer in 2019. And you know, if I had known. So, yeah, it's one of those things. Right. But the fact that it ties me back to Charlie.
You may be saving lives that you don't even know who they are. And I think that's wonderful. Hey, time is of the essence. Will promise me that we'll do a part 2 of this, and I'll have questions for you. I just want to ask, did Charlie ever meet Pete Sheehy, who was the Yankee equipment manager, who did exactly what Charlie did with the Yankees? He signed the baseballs for them, and I wonder if they ever got together and kind of smiled at what they did, and but we have no.
There's a show that I have the recording of, and it was called oh my gosh, What's My Line? Back in the day, and it was a show that Peter. Oh my gosh, what was the guy's name? Famous actor, good looking, Peter Haywood, Peter Lawford. Peter, does that sound right? Lawford? Peter Lawford was on it.
Peter Lawford was a Kennedy in-law.
There you
go. An original Rat Packer.
Okay. Well,
if you remember the Rat.
Yeah. But the episode that Peter Lawford was on, and they did a Jimmy Durante one trying to guess who he was. But at the end of this episode, Charlie comes out with the Yankee Batboy, and they both sign their names live, which is really cool to see. And then, as you know, the style of the game, they have to guess who they are, but there's 2 of them, and they could not guess that they were, you know, adult Batboys, which was funny. Funny story at the end I have on that one too. So yeah, we could go on and on for days. I have stories for days. because of Peter.
We'll do this in part two. We'll do this in part two. I'm sorry to have to rush you. Time is of the essence, as I said.
Absolutely.
Greg will hear more from you, and you could tell me the Jimmy Durante story that you wanted to tell on the next time the three of us get together. Thank you for listening, everybody. This has been a tremendous show, and like I say, I'm honored to have you both, and I enjoyed it, and I know my listeners did as well. So thank you for listening. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. I'm Ralph Tycho, the weak link of it all, but I am a hell of a producer because I got the three of you. I got the three of us together, and it made for wonderful times for me. So thank you again.
Hey,
thank you
Ralph,
both.
thank you so much. Really appreciate.
Yeah, thank you, Ralph, for doing this and keeping the memory of our grandfather alive.
We'll hear more from you, Greg, on part two, and that will happen when it does. But and thank you again, and thank you for listening, everybody. I gotta say, adios, and what? Happy trails. Absolutely a great time.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices, and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.